This is a show about breasts and the people who have them, from bras and sexuality to health and everyday life. This is the very best podcast ever. Hello, Breasties. Nadia Figueroa, bra designer and boob aficionado here. And holy bazongas, Breasties, it's our 10th episode. I can't believe it. I've loved every step of it, and I can't thank you loyal listeners enough. So this is the part of the episode where I ask you, if you love us, and I know you do, head over to your podcast app. Is it Apple? Spotify? We don't play favorites. And rate, review, and subscribe so that we can keep bringing you more content. It really helps new listeners find the show, and we know there are so many more breasties out there that we haven't met yet. The Very Breast podcast producer, Alyssa McHugh, and I felt like 10 was a nice, even, round number to help end our very first season on. So we're going to take a little break after this episode so we can gear up for an even bigger and better season 2. So enjoy your holidays, and we'll see you in the new year. This episode, we'll be taking a hard left turn from our recent topics to talk about something totally different. What some might say our breasts do best, breastfeeding. I know, I've really let my nerd flag fly in these last few episodes and gone really heavy on the science. But today, we're going to talk less about the science of breasts and more about the personal experience of having them and of breastfeeding. This is not going to be a how-to guide on how to breastfeed. It's also not a declaration that breastfeeding is the only way to nurture or bond with your baby. For many reasons, a mother may or may not be willing or able to breastfeed her baby. And thankfully, we live in a day and age where that's a completely viable and safe option. From the time a new mom first gets pregnant, her breasts start to ready themselves for nursing. Those breast changes are actually among the first signs of pregnancy. The breasts and nipples are tender and can ache. The nipples and areolas start to get enlarged and even darken in color. And the breasts themselves get bigger and heavier and more veiny as the blood supply increases. So why choose to breastfeed? Well, experts say that any amount of breastfeeding is beneficial for both baby and mom, even if it's only for a short amount of time. For baby, breastfeeding reduces the risk of infections, lowers the risk of some childhood cancers and juvenile diabetes, reduces the occurrence of allergies and eczema, and helps with digestive issues like diarrhea and constipation. Like our guest will tell you later, it's all about the poops with babies, right? Breastfeeding a baby also boosts her immune system because it's one of the chances for a mom to pass her own antibodies to her baby. Breastfed babies tend to get fewer infections and also heal more quickly from infections. Along with mom's antibodies, breast milk contains valuable proteins, fats, sugars, and probiotics that support baby's immune system. And it also cuts the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, by about half. And for mom, breastfeeding helps shorten the recovery time after birth, helping the uterus return to its pre-pregnancy size. It's cheaper and sometimes more convenient than formula feeding. Something I also find fascinating is that breastfeeding reduces the risk of breast and ovarian cancer, especially if you breastfeed for more than a year. It's literally because if your breast cells are making milk 24/7, they're too busy to act up. There are also so many psychological benefits for moms who choose to breastfeed. Breastfeeding can help lower mom's inflammation levels, which in turn lowers the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and stress. And surprisingly, some breastfeeding moms say they actually experience better sleep. They fall asleep easier, stay asleep longer, and sleep more deeply. One of the most beautiful aspects of breastfeeding, though, is the bond that occurs between mom and baby while nursing. This happens in large part because of the skin-to-skin contact that happens between them. And most experts say that this bonding in the first few years of life can help lessen social and behavioral problems in the future. It encourages moms to know their baby and recognize their cues and needs. Infants placed in this early skin-to-skin contact within the first hour of birth seem to also interact with their mothers more later. This skin-to-skin contact is so beneficial that the World Health Organization actually recommends encouraging breastfeeding within the first 10 minutes of birth, and when possible, even earlier. Okay. I know, I said I wasn't going to geek out on you guys, but I'm going to throw just a little bit of science in here. So let's dive into one of my favorite topics, breast anatomy. The breast is primarily made of two tissues: fatty tissue, the bouncy stuff, and glandular tissue, the part that makes milk. Milk is made in small clusters of cells called alveoli and then travels down ducts out of the nipple openings. That's right, I said openings, plural. It's not just one hole in the nipple the milk squirts out of. There are 15 to 20 openings for milk to flow out of the nipple. Think more showerhead than hose. Remember how I said the nipple and areola actually get darker during pregnancy? There's a theory that this is to make the nipple more visible to baby and help her latch. There are also small bumps on the areola called Montgomery glands. These little bumps create a natural oil that cleans, lubricates, and protects the nipple during breastfeeding. It actually contains an enzyme that kills bacteria. Boobs are freaking amazing. When a baby suckles at a breast, it stimulates tiny nerve endings in the nipple, which causes two hormones to be released: prolactin and oxytocin. Prolactin is the hormone that actually helps make the milk, and oxytocin causes the muscles around the glandular tissue in the breast to contract, which then pushes the milk into the milk ducts and out through the openings in the nipple. Now, oxytocin is a very special hormone. It's sometimes called the love hormone. It's a feel-good hormone that's involved not just in breastfeeding. It lowers stress and anxiety, lowers blood pressure. It can cause muscle contractions like the ones in the uterus during childbirth, and it's also a major player in orgasms. It's involved in social relationships, trust, love, and bonding, like the bonding that happens between mommy and baby during breastfeeding. There's a physical reflex that happens when these two hormones are released called the letdown reflex. I kind of think of this reflex as the gate opening to allow the milk to flow. For some women, they actually feel this reflex happen. It can feel like tingling or a feeling of fullness. But for other women, it doesn't feel like anything at all. It can happen 2 or 3 times in a feeding, and usually it's more obvious early on in breastfeeding. That letdown reflex can happen not just when a baby suckles. It can happen if a mom hears, sees, or just thinks about her baby, when she uses a breast pump or expresses milk with her hands, or just looks at a photo of her baby or hears any baby cry. In some cases, when feeding from one breast, women actually notice milk dripping from the other one. But just like everything else, it's a little different for everybody. Breastfeeding has, of course, been a thing since the beginning of human history. But it doesn't come so easy to every breastfeeding mom. It comes with a whole host of breast issues that aren't so fun to deal with. Some common problems are things like sore and cracked nipples, mastitis and other infections, or engorged breasts that are tight, heavy, and painful. There are also cases where a mom either can't or chooses not to breastfeed. This can happen for a variety of reasons. Maybe mom doesn't produce enough milk. Maybe she had a mastectomy. Maybe baby has trouble latching, or it's just too painful for mom. Or her work schedule doesn't allow her to breastfeed according to baby's schedule. Or maybe she just chooses to bottle feed or formula feed, and that's fine. Cures for what my sources referred to as quote-unquote lactation failure, and for the record, I hate that phrasing, have been mentioned as early as 1550 BC. The Papyrus Ebers, the earliest known medical encyclopedia, gave a very creative cure for women who had trouble producing milk. Quote, "To get a supply of milk in a woman's breast for suckling a child, warm the bones of a swordfish in oil and rub her back with it. Or, let the woman sit cross-legged and eat fragrant bread of souse dura while rubbing the parts with the poppy plant." Dura is a type of sorghum grain, and sousing is, I think, some kind of pickling process, but I'm not 100% sure what part needs to be rubbed with the poppy plant. I'm pretty sure this didn't work, though. What it does indicate, though, is that not being able to lactate has been an issue in all of human history, and humans have come up with some pretty creative solutions. For much of history, though, the solution was the employment of wet nurses. Dating as far back as 2,000 years ago, wet nurses, or women who were hired to breastfeed other women's children, were the primary means of solving this problem. Wet nurses have such a long and fascinating history. I'm planning to dedicate an entire episode just to the history of wet nursing next season, so stay tuned. In the Industrial Revolution, as women entered the workforce and weren't able to breastfeed their babies on a schedule, many babies were left at home with no one to nurse them, and there was a very high rate of infant death as mothers tried DIY methods of feeding their babies that were either unsanitary or didn't provide the nutrition they needed. Since lactation is a supply and demand situation, there was also the issue of mothers lactating less since they were breastfeeding their babies less. There was even a theory floating around that lactation was a disappearing human process. This is when physicians began to get involved in theorizing on breastfeeding, publishing infant care manuals and feeding schedules, and in 1865, this led to the invention of baby formula. The very first baby formula was invented by a chemist named Justus von Liebig and was made of cow's milk, wheat, malt flour, and potassium bicarbonate, which is sort of like baking soda. These days, the alternative to breastfeeding is usually formula. Formula is a catch-all term for substitute milk that is given to newborns and infants in place of natural breast milk. There are three main types: cow milk protein base, which is made from cow's milk that's been altered to be more similar to human breast milk; soy base, which is great if your baby is intolerant to cow's milk or if you want to keep animal proteins out of her diet; and protein hydrolysate formula, which is easier to digest for babies who can't tolerate the other two types of formula. That last one also happens to be the most expensive type of formula. All three of these formulas are enriched with nutrients and proteins to mimic breast milk and are totally acceptable options to feed babies when breast milk is not an option. But once upon a time, safe formula wasn't available. In the course of human history, everything from donkey's milk to diluted wines, soups, and eggs to suckling directly from animals like goats were used as alternatives to natural breast milk. There are even artifacts of baby bottles found from as early as 800 BC. Whether a mother breastfeeds or formula feeds, as long as she is nourishing and bonding with her baby, either method is a perfectly acceptable way to love her baby. I want to quote Dr. Jacqueline Wolfe, professor and author of Don't Kill Your Baby, Public Health and the Decline of Breastfeeding in the 19th and 20th Centuries. Quote, "Infant feeding creates so much emotion and controversy. Women who are mothers, that tends to be a big part of their identity. We want to perform well. We want to do the best for our children. Infant feeding absolutely is a woman's choice, and there are all kinds of reasons why women choose to feed their babies however they decide to feed their babies. But you can't talk about breastfeeding in the United States without pointing out that every other wealthy country has found a way to accommodate breastfeeding mothers, and usually in the form of a lengthy paid maternity leave. It's very hard for American women to breastfeed, even according to our own medical guidelines, because the social supports are not in place." End quote. Although Dr. Wolfe is speaking specifically about breastfeeding, what she's saying, I think, applies to motherhood in general. Mothers want what's best for their babies, and sometimes that's not the easiest thing to give. Society tends to judge women no matter what choice they make. That doesn't make the process and journey of motherhood any easier, nor is it anyone's right to judge a mother's choice as long as she is caring for and loving her baby. And although it's not always the easiest thing to ask for, sometimes it helps to just have a little help. For this episode, we spoke to April Kerwood, a postpartum doula, lactation consultant, and mom. April is passionate about being a woman who serves other women, and she's the type of person that emanates warmth and makes you excited about what's to come when she speaks to you. Her passion for her profession and for empowering women is just so inspiring. This was actually my first solo interview, and I was a little nervous, but April's approach and conversation reflects her approach to her job. She is warm, comforting, and reserved of any and all judgment. And when she talks to you, she puts you at ease and reminds you, you've got this. Just a few things I took away from my conversation with April that I think are really words to live by. We should all be listening before we speak. Our bodies are doing amazing work. Don't Google all the things. And let's just assume everything's going to be okay until we get information that says otherwise. So snuggle up on your couch, make yourself a warm cup of tea, and enjoy this interview that I promise will give you the warm and fuzzies. Please welcome April Kerwood to the very best podcast ever. Welcome to the very best podcast ever. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you say hello to the Breasties out there and introduce yourself?
Hi, friends. I am April Kerwood. I am a postpartum doula and certified lactation counselor in Columbus, Ohio. I work for myself and serve families here in Central Ohio doing all sorts of consults. So I do traditional postpartum doula work, I do lactation work, and then most recently this past year, I've just kind of added in. I say, what do you need? And I'll come do it. So my life and background have kind of led me lots of ways, and serving families using that experience, my personal experience, professional experiences, is just what I've been doing. And I love it. This has been a big year for that.
So let's just start at the root of it all. What is a doula?
So a doula is just basically a woman that serves other women. And in our culture and country, currently that means women either giving birth. It's someone who will go with you to your birthplace and kind of guide you through just that kind of traditional, it goes way back, traditional women supporting women role of kind of walking you through this experience that historically our country has kind of minimized. So we're kind of going back to like, okay, who can we really rely on? Who can we really trust? Who can we lean on? And who can we bring with us? So there's birth doulas. And then there's postpartum doulas who do the same thing, but kind of serve in the fourth trimester, which is after the baby's born in your home. And that's where I specifically work. And I see it as sort of this transition to motherhood for women. I think that birth is incredible and important, and how you birth definitely dictates what your postpartum period looks like. But it's also longer, I think, than we've given it credit for. This transition from a woman to a mother is huge, and meeting women where they are, where they live, in their space, and for whatever they need, I think is really critical to our society in general, and just to the well-being of women and children. So that is what where I work. But doulas overall are just someone you grab and put on your team when you go through these transitions of life.
So I think that some of our listeners may be familiar with the concept of doulas. I've heard it like here and there in social media recently, but one thing that was new to me was this idea of a postpartum doula. I'd never even heard of it before I heard of you. And I know it's a pretty intensive certification process. There's codes of ethics you have to follow. How exactly do you become a postpartum doula?
Well, there's lots of avenues for any kind of doula certification. So as we talk about them more and more people kind of say, oh, hey, like supporting women. Yes. And in this avenue and in this time in their life, absolutely. There's been more certifying agencies. So because I was kind of enamored with birth after the birth of my first son, I could hear some of the names thrown around of like credentialing agencies or certification avenues. So I knew about DONA, which is Doulas of North America. And so I had heard that as like an established role or certifying agency for doulas. But when I've been asked through the course of having my business, what people should do if they're pursuing becoming a doula or certification, it's really very personal, the training you can get. I've seen faith-based training for some doulas be what they want to do, and because that's how they intend to serve their clients, and those are the clients they intend to serve. I've seen very open, I think certifications agencies with lots of emphasis on all populations. So if that is important to you and that's who you want to serve, then absolutely seek out that certifying agency that's going to give you that full scope of who you're going to serve. So I think that there's a couple things involved. It depends on, you can have a way that you want to serve before you even get any education. If you come to doula work and you say, I see my strength as being this, then I would seek out a certification that just validates that. Because if you have a strength and you have a heart to serve, then I wouldn't want to see you talked out of that to serve a different way just because that's what your certifying agency believes. So I think that it's such a service and kind of mission-oriented work anyway. So finding an agency or an education base that kind of supports your strengths already is really important. So I would never recommend one for someone without sitting with them and saying, hey, what do you believe you're bringing to this profession? Let's find you education and support and information to grow your business with your strengths in mind. And there are more and more of them as we go through the years of this being a more, just like you said, like a more normal, or not normal, I guess,
socially
normalized.
accepted.
Yeah, just as we hear it more and it's thrown around more and we meet more people that are doulas. And, our community of doulas in Columbus is fairly large. And that's a great credit to all of us. So I think that finding something that supports what you already have and know as your strengths is really important. And then what is their certifying criteria? What do they want you to do, learn? And then how often do you need to recertify? Because a lot of us just want to do the work. We like, okay, so I have the education and I have the fire and I have the passion and I want to make sure that I'm covered in order to do this work. But also, some of these certifying agencies, it's a lot of time and money to keep up your certification, which I believe in, because I think we should be educated and somewhat credentialed to do some of the work, but when we talk about what a doula actually does, you'll probably hear me say why I think that it can be a little personal too. But they'll require recertification and recertification fees, and all of those things need to be kind of factored in before you choose which route you go.
So let's talk a little bit about what a doula actually does. Tell me about your process with your clients.
Well, it started really organically as far as like this transition. So I am a mother of 4. And I always tell people if I needed a postpartum doula, I mean, I think everyone can use a postpartum doula, but the highest amount of need I had for one was with my 4th. I had 3 other kids that were in school and preschool, and he struggled to breastfeed. He had a lip tie early on. So I had a bout of mastitis breastfeeding him. And
Ooh, okay. So, a lip tie is a condition where a baby's upper lip is attached to her gums in a way that makes lip movement and latching difficult. A lactation consultant like April might ask to watch a baby feed and check for signs of a lip tie, such as difficulty latching or trouble latching deep enough for feeding, clicking sounds during breastfeeding, spitting out or choking on milk, or cluster feeding, which is feeding with high frequency. For baby, it can lead to poor nutrition and dental issues, and for mom, it can contribute to damage to her nipples, issues with milk supply, or mastitis. It's similar to a tongue tie, where there's an issue with how baby's tongue is connected to the bottom of her mouth. Luckily, usually both of these issues can be fixed with pretty simple outpatient procedures.
Life was just really overwhelming in that moment where I'm pumping and we're feeding him through alternative methods, and I'm finding lactation professionals and doctor's appointments and all these things. And, it reminds me a lot when I walk into homes. I think my work is to create or help create peace in the midst of all this transition. And I don't say chaos because it's not chaos. Babies are welcomed guests into homes. So to say that then creates chaos kind of mitigates or minimizes the truth of it. We know they're coming. It's just that we have unrealistic expectations about what that's going to look like. So they are not the chaos. A lot of times it's our expectations or the dream we had in our head, which I get. I had it 4 times too. This is going to look like this. And then it looks a little different, and we have to kind of hit the ground running because there is no big pause on that time in our lives. So my process with them is always to remember what it felt like to me in that moment when, everything kind of felt like the wheels were coming off, and what would I have needed? What would I have wanted? And really, I just go in and say, okay, like, where do we find the peace for you in this moment? And that is not magically fixing any one thing normally. It's kind of a smoothing out of all the things. It's talking about infant biology, what babies really need, not what we've been told they should need. And then realistically looking at this birthing person and their recovery and what they need to do that. And so I always say, I say balance is bullshit because it's just not true. Like, there is not really a good way to balance the needs of a newborn because they just take precedent. It doesn't mean nobody else's matter. It means that at this given moment, this is what we're doing. And then what we do is check everything else underneath it, make sure it's still getting done, but also we know that this is a brief period of time. So I just kind of go in and say, what feels the worst? Like, what feels terrible? And how do we fix that? Because typically moms and families in this transition, especially first-time moms, have a hard time identifying what's terrible and what's normal, but not meeting their expectation. Right?
Yeah. Well, normal can sometimes be terrible too, if we're being honest.
But also they don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Right. So, this is just, they go, oh, this is so terrible. And I'm like, this is normal baby behavior. I validate and hear, and I see that it feels terrible to you. So what are we needing to change? Is it that, do you just need to hear that it's normal because you didn't expect that to be normal? Because it is, and a lot of times I'll hear myself saying like, there is nothing that I see that is so alarming, in this home, in this moment. And they just go, oh, okay. Because they feel very isolated by everybody's front page stories and, beautiful scripted,
Instagram
this
babies.
is what's happening in our house. Yes. I mean, we can talk about social media. Woof. Because like that wasn't a thing when I was having babies. And I'm really thankful that I wasn't comparing my reality to everybody else's glossy, front page. So that factors in too. I think sometimes we just kind of, is it terrible? Is it normal? And how do we make it feel less terrible? Because I will always believe them when they say it's terrible. But what is that? And how do we take everyone into account? Because I want to speak for the baby in the normal behavior, but never to the end of the mother. Like, this is not about martyrdom. This is not, well, your baby needs this, because you're a whole person too. So when I started my work, everybody's like, you love babies. This is so great for you. And I was like, I do. But you know what I really love is I love women and their strength. And I love moms, and I love them watching them come into their confidence and their own, in a world that keeps telling them they're doing it wrong, but they're not, is so amazing for me, because I see it on I get emotional about it. I see it switch on their faces from this idea that, is this wrong? Is this bad? Is this right? To no, this is my baby. This is our life. I know what I'm doing. I'm really good at this, and I can trust myself. And these messages that keep telling me that I'm doing something wrong or what's wrong, so that's sort of like the shortest version of the goal of my work in general, is to see that switch on their face where they just go, oh yeah, I got this. Cause I know they do from the minute I walk in the door. I know they're capable. I fully believe in it. But watching them come to it is what drives me to continue to do the work.
Listening to you talk now, and even when I was doing my research on you and clicking around your website, I feel so much warmth coming from your technique. And this may be a little TMI, but my husband and I have been trying to get pregnant for a little while now. And the roadblocks and obstacles and successes, failures, it can just be so discouraging. But like listening to you talk now and like reading your bio, like it makes me actually like excited to try to get pregnant again.
I love that. There's no such thing as TMI. Also, I get pee stick pictures. I get pictures of boobs. There is no such thing as TMI, and I love it. So,
one thing I really love about your whole policy is you mentioned support that listens before speaking. And I love that phrase. I wrote it down earlier, and there's a lot in that statement. Can you tell me a little more about that approach?
I think yes, of course. I think I sort of already keyed in on it. If I think back of how I get real passionate and fired up about what I'm talking about, but it's that walk into the house and I just say, what do you need? And this past year, really making the change to, I used to have this list of like postpartum doulas provide light snacks and, do light housework and help you with recovery care and baby care. And all those things are wonderful. And
housework?
Yes. Light housework, postpartum doulas. Absolutely. Because, we come in from a culture where women are told that we should be able to do it all. So another, I say balance is bullshit. I also say that super mom needs to go, because when we say that, we actually are telling women that they shouldn't need help. And I really dislike it. So you can be super because you're doing an excellent job and you love your baby the best. You're the best mother for your baby. But when we say she's a super mom, it usually is about all the outward things a woman is doing. And in fact, there's nothing into like what's happening in her heart. Like, is she driven to do the things she's doing because she wants to? Is she doing them because she feels like she has to? Does she then not complain because there's no space for her actual voice about what she is feeling? So I could go on about that forever. But the listening, before speaking is that idea, like what is happening if someone's saying like, hey, that lady's a super mom. I know I want to walk up to her and touch her on the shoulder and say, how are you really? Like what is really happening in this space? So over the past year, I really just changed the idea of I'm going to tell you what I offer and you can decide which of these services you want when I come to you. And instead, I said, just tell me what you need because you're going to need something. So I just started saying, like, you might not know what you're going to need, but you're going to need something. You're going to need someone to process your birth with you because it went sideways. And that really affects how we step into motherhood. You're going to need breastfeeding help because it is really challenging to manage this new physical body that we have on top of meeting this brand new human who, of course, we love, but we don't know. So that's a lot to factor in. You might need help with just the mechanics of like, what does my day-to-day look like now? Or you might need some hands-on help for, I'm really recovering and, I have a partner that can't take a lot of time off so it's all of those things. And it's just saying like, what do you need in this moment? But also trying to educate women that like, it's okay if you need something and you don't have to know what yet, but plan for the fact that this is a giant transition. So the listening before speaking is just really about like, you tell me, one, how you're doing, because I really care about that. And then two, how do we make the terrible better? And then how do we make the hard easier? How do we do that for you? What does it look like for you? So it's really just that. And then I think it comes from a place of like genuinely wanting to know how they feel about all of the things.
I think that this concept, this listen before speaking is a principle that applies to so many different mediums. It doesn't have to just be in your line of work. It's something that I think that we should take as just advice for life.
I agree. Yes. Well, I think we all want to be heard and seen, right?
Yeah.
I talk about kids that way. I'm like, sometimes I just talked about a toddler that a client had. And we really just said, sometimes it's not about making it better in that moment. Like, trying to rationalize with a toddler in the middle of a fit. Sometimes you just go, it feels awful, doesn't it? And that's all they're trying to say. And as adults, we try to like talk them out of it, right? We go, oh, you're fine. Or, and I have a really, I have a really strong feeling tied to people telling me I'm fine. Don't tell me how I feel. So I feel strongly about that when we talk about kids, because, a kid falls down and we say, oh, you're fine. Right. They didn't lose a limb, but are they really fine? Because it's okay if they're not. It's upsetting. And allowing them that moment instead of rushing them through it actually gets us a lot further than just the hurry up and go. And the hurry up and go is what we do for so many things. Like you just said so succinctly, like it can be applied to so much. Listen first. What do they need to say in that moment? Ouch, that hurt. And then usually they're like, you go, yeah, it did. And then they move on. But if we go, you're fine, and try to hurry them through it, they're not. And then they've been kind of belittled, and no one deserves that. So I think we all want to be seen. We all want to be heard, and how it looks for different ages and stages of us might change, but it's a really basic human need.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about breasts.
Yes, let's.
I feel like our breasts, they take on so much of the brunt of all our life changes.
Truth.
In your experience personally or with clients that you've seen, how does pregnancy and having a baby affect or change your breasts?
Oh my goodness. Well, personally, I would say I have had breasts that are all the different sizes. When it comes to being, an early teenager to like an adult to a pregnant mother, I always think it was so cute in pregnancy. There's those adorable little pregnant people, and they kind of make a B with their body, like the capital B. And it's like a little boob for the top B, part of the capital B, and then this big belly. And I was like a D. Like when I was pregnant, it was just like the boobs got so giant. They sat on top of the belly. I was a capital D. Like, who are these like capital B women? Because that is not what I look like. They were.
You mean like the shape of a D? I thought you meant like a D cup.
Yeah, no, not a D cup. I know I should have clarified because you're bras. But the shape of a capital like D, like these women. There's like all these like baby showers, and you can still see them periodically, like baby shower things. It has like the outline of a woman, and she's like a side facing pregnant character, and her breasts are the little part of a capital B, like they're smaller, and then her belly is the bottom. And so when I kind of like turned sideways when I was pregnant with my first son, I'm like, that is not what this looks like. This is not. And I just, I gained all this great weight with him. And so my breasts were huge. And I remember seeing a friend of mine who I've known since I was a little girl when I was pregnant. And she's like, your boobs are giant. And I was like, I know. Like they really just grew.
I didn't notice.
Yeah. They're just all of me is currently getting bigger because I'm making this human. Yes. Good eyes. So I think that pregnancy and especially breastfeeding, but pregnancy and changes so much for us. I think for some of us who have had bigger breasts or like kind of eye-catching breasts, I don't know how to say it the right way. Like if we got breasts young, like I did, we kind of got that attention that maybe we didn't want a little sooner. So for some of us that had that experience, having a cause to use them feels really good. Right? Like this isn't just for random old guys on the street to turn it. Like that's not a good feeling when you're young. And when you have breasts younger, that happens sooner. And
yep, it definitely does.
Yeah, it's not okay. So when we have, and that's a personal thing for me. So when I've had that experience. So when I came to having breasts that were then going to be used to feed my child, it was like, cool. Like now they are more than just head turners that I didn't really invite or want in the first place. They're doing this amazing work. And I don't think I gave them enough credit through pregnancy. So I would say like first time moms are kind of like, oh, look at these things. I have a really sweet, close girlfriend who actually just had her baby a few weeks ago. And she's like, look at these things. And she loves them because she was smaller, before pregnancy. And then she gets these really full breasts when she's pregnant and breastfeeding. And she is like, look at this, and she loves that. And that's a great, like fun part of it for her. So I would say sometimes we haven't paid enough attention to them. And then it kind of comes right to the front of us, not to be cute, but like, then we're really aware through our pregnancy and we start thinking about it more like, oh yeah, these like are actually going to do something, or I hope they do something, or, I plan to use them for something else after this. So it just kind of starts the thought on our bodies in a new way, which I really love, because it's less about, hopefully it's less about what they look like and more about what they're capable of. And I like that switch. I love seeing that switch on women, less about the aesthetic, about my body isn't this, or it is too much of this. And the shift to really like, what can my body do? Which is what's so exciting about birth and breastfeeding and using your body to care for children or anything in your life, not just mothers. But really getting that shift in your mindset of like, my body is for me to like live this big, beautiful life, not just to be looked at. So like, how am I going to use it? I always say that I'm like, I'm just going to use it all up. Like, I just want to use it all up. So, so I think I see that. And I like that. I like that shift a lot when we talk about women's bodies and especially their breasts, kind of, what are these going to do now? Like, let's just see. And I think I've seen less struggle with that than I've seen this empowerment of like, can you believe I grew this baby and then I am now feeding it too? And I'm like, yeah, I can totally believe it. It's awesome. Like, you're doing so great.
What are some of the challenges that you find happen to clients? Like what would you say that are some obstacles they have to overcome most often when it comes to breastfeeding specifically?
Yeah. Breastfeeding specifically. I think that really it's the fear of not having enough milk, or so just in the way that I said, it's empowering to say, here's this shift of like using our body instead of just our body being a decoration. And the amazing confidence that comes from accepting that mental shift. But there's also pressure there, right? We just grew this human. That takes a lot. And we don't give women enough credit for that, what it does to their bodies, like physically, but also just what those transitions look like. For every woman, it's not super comfortable. Not every woman is like, oh, I just love being pregnant. And that's okay. I would love to see it be from a more organic and genuine place of like, I'm just genuinely uncomfortable, instead of it being about what it looks like or what it's supposed to behave like in our society in general. But it's okay to have whatever feeling you have. But on top of that, growing the human, then the human is born and we have this desire to breastfeed. And it's just an added like, okay, can I do this part now? And that's why I said earlier on, birth dictates so much of how we mother. Because if we have an empowering birth, we are then confident in our body's ability to do all the things. And we kind of step into breastfeeding with more confidence. If we had a birth that kind of went sideways, we can get that shaken a little bit. The trust that our bodies will do what we ask them to do, gets a little shook. So I think that that takes a little more work. And then it's just the pressure, like, am I doing it right? Is there enough? Am I making enough? How do I also live my life and enjoy this time with my baby in the midst of this kind of culture that tells us we have to constantly be moving? And I have to be sitting to do this with my boobs out all the time. So I would say that most of the time it's like, am I making enough? Am I doing enough? Is this enough for the baby? And that's the calls I get.
Yeah. What about some physical challenges you've come across? Earlier, you mentioned mastitis.
Yes. So mastitis it just means milk stasis. So once you have, transitioned, you have early on, you have colostrum in your breast. So the minute your baby is born, actually at the end of your pregnancy, you have this thick, honey, beautiful milk. It's called colostrum. I like to call it newborn milk.
A newborn's stomach is itty bitty, about the size of a marble, so they don't really need to eat very much in the beginning. Colostrum is the very first milk a mom produces. It's a concentrated mixture of immune factors, protein, sugar, and fat, and usually baby only drinks a few teaspoons a day. It's usually produced for the first 2 to 5 days of birth, and it's considered a newborn superfood. Breasts, man, doing the work.
Because it's perfectly made for them, for their teeny tiny tummies. It helps them clear out their first poops. And, when we have babies, it's all about the poops. Everybody starts talking about poop and pee. So it's perfectly made for them. So this idea that we say you have to wait for your milk to come in is kind of misleading, because you have colostrum at the end of your pregnancy. And in those early days, what we're actually waiting for is for it to transition. So the challenges in there are not stimulating the breast enough. Which is what leads to mastitis. So you're stimulating the breast to release milk. It's move the milk, feed your baby, move your milk, feed your baby. So when we're doing that, it's a system of supply and demand. It turns to supply and demand. So if we skip a feed, or we wear a restrictive bra, and we have milk and we're nursing, we can kind of plug up the milk ducts in our breasts that look like a bunch of grapes, and one of them won't clear. And if we don't get it to clear, it'll be hard and uncomfortable. But if we leave it there, it can turn into mastitis, which is basically becomes an infection. So we don't want that. So it just means milk stasis, which is milk not moving. Stuck milk, if you're a toddler, stuck milk. But we want to keep it moving and going. So mastitis can happen. It's not the end of your breastfeeding relationship. It's uncomfortable. It's a lot to work through, but it's not the end of anything. It just means that we were kind of ineffectively moving milk from our breasts to our baby, and we need to figure that out. It's the same as plugged ducts that can be troubling. A lot of first-time moms think they have nipples that aren't going to be conducive to breastfeeding, and that's not necessarily true, because babies don't nipple feed, they breastfeed. So they take a whole, a lot of areola and nipple in their mouth, and all the mechanics of that aren't hindered necessarily by nipples that haven't seen a lot of baby mouth action. So I think that, like, the things that we think are challenging are really just the learning this new skill. So there's very few times that moms genuinely do not have the capability of making enough milk for their baby, or they have an anatomical structure that prohibits them. And there are so many amazing ways around a lot of those as is. So I always say that I operate under the assumption that everything is going to go well until we get information otherwise. Because I think that our current mode is always like, but what about this? And what about that? And what about that? And I'm like, well, there's 100 things that we could say could possibly go wrong. But how about we just assume that, like, we're going to figure it out as we go, and we're going to give ourselves grace and your baby grace, and we're going to see how you do together. And then we're going to go from there. Because I think we already worry enough about all the what ifs. So we're just going to say, we're going to take the challenges as they come. But mastitis for one, and those anatomical changes or challenges. And then just kind of the mechanics of getting it rolling in those early days.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So without giving away too many trade secrets, because I know you offer classes.
I do.
Let's say you are walking a brand new mom, just had her baby through breastfeeding. What's that process like?
I mean, the funniest thing I think about me, which I said to you before, is that it's never just like, here's your baby and here's your boob. I say that all the time to my clients. I'm like, but how? I say, okay, but how are you? So really, it's just, where is the hard? Where is the this feels awful? What is it? Is it actual pain? When you're latching? Is it just that you didn't know you would sit down enough, like so much, and that's frustrating? So really, it would be teaching them that what I said earlier, that milk is supply and demand. So if your body is doing this really amazing thing, knowing that your baby is on the outside. So your baby is born, you give birth to the placenta, and all of a sudden your body goes, cool, your baby's on the outside. Let me make milk. And it's just this amazing system. And your baby goes, cool, I'm here. I want to eat. And they're just primed for it. So when we look at them and put them to the breast, and we continue to do that, we start this, this system where we're working together. And I think that when new moms get overwhelmed by all the extra fluff. So I think the very simplest thing, now that I'm like talking and I could say 100 things, the very simplest thing I would say to them is just look at your baby. Mm-hmm. Just look at your baby and look at what your baby genuinely needs, and then have faith that you will figure it out. So I think that would be it. I'd be like, just look at your baby. Like, there's a lot about the mechanics, that we can work out if it feels a little itchy. But really, just look at your baby. Learn when your baby needs you. Learn what your baby's doing. If that's painful, make an adjustment. I trust you there. Teaching them to trust their baby's cues and their responses. I think a lot of times I will get feedback from them about something they learned that I couldn't have seen because I'm not with their baby every day, all day. Mm-hmm. So the very simple act of, sit down every time you go to try. You have to look at it like it's practice. It's another chance to get it right.
What are some things that you've learned from your clients?
Oh my gosh. I don't think we have even close to enough time for that. They teach me so much, so often. I think what mainly they teach me, like I said, is that like, they're just like, I do get super emotional about it. They're just so beautiful. And they all bring something different that is exactly what their baby needs. And it's like, it feels like this great gift that I've been given, that like I get to walk into their house and I get to watch them do this work. So it's like every time there is a new baby in a home and I get to witness that woman mothering that baby, it's completely different. I could have 6 clients in a row and there would be something different. So they teach me resilience. They teach me vulnerability, because they they lay themselves out in front of me when I walk in the door, so that I can help them. And that is just the most brave thing I think that we can do as humans, and especially as women, I know I always go back to it, but like in a culture that teaches us we have to fight each other, it is the most brave to sit in front of another woman who is there with the intention of helping you and really be honest about what you're feeling, what you're going through, how hard these certain moments are. So they teach me that all the time. And they teach me how to better and better listen before I speak, because every time I do that, we both become better humans and we get the result that we're working for together. Because we're like connected by that ability to just be in that moment and kind of do the work, but really just acknowledge each other and be present. So they teach me all of those things. They teach me like the greatest attributes that you want to have as a human. That's what they teach me. And then they're younger than me and they teach me about DoorDash and wonderful things like that. They're like, do you DoorDash? I'm like, no. And I've been in one Uber in my life. because that is just not what I do. And I didn't even ride in it for long. It dropped me off at a car. Like it took me from a location to a car. But they were like, get in. My girlfriends are so fun, but they're like, get in. You've never done it. I'm like, okay. So they teach me wonderful things like that. They're like, you don't know about this app. And I mean, I think they are why I have Venmo. Like I wasn't going to have it, but they're like, I'm going to Venmo you, right? And I'm like, sure, sure. And they're like, what's Venmo? So they keep me very relevant, but truthfully, like, honestly, they really just like, they teach me and show me like the most admirable human qualities all the time.
And do you get to see that bond grow between like a new mother and her baby? Is that something that you get to witness?
Absolutely. So I think it's this like two strangers meeting each other. So there's always this meeting, and when I go in when there's a brand new baby, I'm like, okay, so does she look like like did you see her and say, of course that's what you look like, or did you go, who is this? Because I personally have had both experiences. I'm like, what? My oldest son was born and I was like, yep, that's my nose. And oh, penis. Yep, it's a boy. Because I was checking, like, who knows? They could have gotten that wrong. But then my second son was born and I was like, what is this? Like, what? So I always ask them, I'm like, is this what you expected and had in your mind? Because sometimes people are like, this is exactly, like, I didn't know that this is exactly what I expected. Or they just go, no, I don't know this little stranger. So there's these moments where they're meeting this new person. And we always talk about, I know you love them, but it's okay that you don't know them yet. Because those two things in adults are really tied. We don't necessarily, like, we don't just love people we don't know. The knowing is how we get to the love. We can love, I love this group of people, like very broad space, but like genuinely this day to day is a growing that happens as they kind of learn the things together. So absolutely, I see that. I see them bonded from the start, like through this experience. But what I really love is the confidence when I come back after visits and they tell me, well, he likes this, or he really doesn't like this. And I get to point out to them, I'm like, look how well you know your baby already, and they just get this look like, yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I do. Like, I'm like, what is this one arm swaddle we're doing? And they're like, he doesn't like it when we do it in any other way. And this is what we got. And I'm like, perfect. Like, this is great. Like, you guys.
Is that like the moment when you step away and you're like, my job here is done?
That's the best part. So I always say my job is to like work myself out of a job. And I said that with a client the other day. And I said, I don't have any desire, to be in your home and in your space for hours and hours on end. I believe in your ability to parent your baby. I just know that it's really noisy outside the walls of your house. And so if I can help you muffle that and really focus on your needs, how you meet your needs, and then making sure that you, like, once you step in your door, there is peace. I always say that. I'm like, what is going to create the peace in here in the midst of this transition? Because perfection is never my goal, but peace can be. You can be peaceful and it not be perfect. So you feel that's what we do.
Do you feel like breastfeeding moms are fed a lot of misinformation? Like, are there any myths you would want to debunk?
Yes. So tons and tons. So one that I think is huge, because I have girlfriends who are so much fun, is this pump and dump. Pump and dump is huge because, like we can't have that for the baby. And so we get all worked up in like dumping breast milk. And I just always say, I'm like, okay, if you could drive a car, if you're not inebriated, like, you're fine. Like, this is just, it only makes me angry. And I don't even drink. So let me just say that, but I know that we enjoy it. And that when you've had this break in a 9-month period of enjoying a glass of wine, the last thing you need is to be like, well, what do I do now? And like, let me time this. And you're just trying to have a glass of wine and watch some Bravo. I had a client who loved Below Deck, and she was just like, I just want to have a glass of wine and watch some Bravo. And I'm like, perfect, you should. But it's just one more way that we tell women that they can't actually live their life and be a mother. So these things where it's like, well, you could do this. Well, lots of things could happen. It's this fear of, you're right. You know what? We don't want to give that to our baby, but how about we trust women that they want to do what's best for their baby too? And we don't just say, no, or, oh my gosh, how dare you? Because we love to say that to women. We
Mm-hmm.
love to say, how dare you?
Society
and it's like, wait,
loves
what?
to shame women any way they can.
Love it.
Yeah.
And in motherhood and breastfeeding, it is rampant, right? That's why women look at me and they say, well, can I, or is this bad? And I'm like, who told you that there is a right and wrong to any of this? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's not. There's a what's right for you. But we love shame and judgment, and it makes, whoever feel better. And then we have these women sitting here in the midst of this giant transition questioning, can I have a glass of wine and eat some salmon on a Monday night?
Yeah.
Love you, Hillary. that's my client who loves Bravo. But those are the things. So that's a huge one. That's giant. Pump and dump is junk. I don't love that. I also don't like the underlying assumption that you are forever tied to your baby and you can't go anywhere. And that you have to start pumping right away, because if not, you'll never get away. Babies in the early days really need their moms. And if you want to breastfeed, then yes, I would love to see you decide that we're going to do that solely for a couple weeks until we establish our milk supply. And then we'll talk about all the rest. But I feel confident asking that because you also need to recover. You have a dinner plate size wound in your womb. You don't need to be going out to brunch a week in. You need to be resting and not doing nothing, but respecting what your body just did. So the idea that, you're just going to, if you breastfeed, you're just never going to have a life outside the walls of your home is something that's sort of like an undercurrent that gets sold to women. And I think is a hindrance, because that's not true. Those early days of motherhood and parenthood feel so long because everything is so new, but they're genuinely so short. Like, I'm a mother to a 15-and-a-half-year-old, and I can close my eyes and see his face on the second day he was alive. And that is not old lady speak for enjoy every minute, because every minute is not enjoyable, but it is to say that I will never regret a moment spent with him in his infancy. Like that's not something we're going to get to the end of our lives and look back on and be like, I wish I wouldn't have spent so much time with my baby. Like that's just not going to happen. But we convince ourselves that that's true in the moment. And it's okay if you need something else or you need a break or all those things, but we've got to keep perspective. So anything that makes you feel like you are now tied forever to your home and this system of breastfeeding is also just a disservice.
Something my mom has always told me is that if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of your baby.
I love her already. Yes, that's so true. And, it's okay to need help to take care of yourself because that's completely normal. The idea that we can do it all is false. So you are better at loving everyone around you that you love when you take care of yourself. That's true for all of us, I think, but that's really wise. I agree 100%.
So what are some cases where you might choose not to or might not be able to breastfeed?
I think medical indications, like we said, it's rare, but there's physical limitations. Sometimes, when we have a prenatal breastfeeding assessment or consultation, we talk about health history. Women with PCOS might have a hindered ability to produce enough milk just because of what PCOS does during puberty in creating those systems for later lactation.
PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, is a hormonal disorder that's pretty common in women. Since it's a syndrome and not a disease, this means that women who have it could have any combination of its many symptoms, which include things like irregular periods, ovarian cysts, acne, weight gain, issues with fertility. And it can also contribute to problems with low milk supply. Being a woman is so fun.
So I think some of those things can happen. I think sometimes really what I see more often than not now is less and it might just be because of my client pool, honestly, because I tend to get clients that aren't intensive breastfeeding cases because they know what I do and I do all the things, right? So, some lactation professionals will really do all the medical things we're going to do, supplemental nursing systems. We're going to do all these things. I get those cases less than other lactation professionals because I also do all the everyday things and the mental health stuff and all those things. So for me, I would say sometimes it ends up being the mental health portion. Like if this is too much for you in this moment, it's not a hill that we're going to, sacrifice ourselves on. Like there is no, this is a mom that does this and she deserves more credit than a mom that does this, because of what you exactly just said that your mom said. When you are taking care of yourself, you take care of yourself, you can take care of everyone else. So I think that in my experience with lactation and breastfeeding moms, it actually happens to be more like, I did this for this long and I feel really good about it.
Mm-hmm.
But moving forward, we need to make a change because it's going to be better for me mental health wise. And I've had the opposite though, too, of clients who are like, no, I'm sticking with it, because like that is going to just, right. So I've had both sides, but honestly, like in my personal experience, professional experience, it really is just a decision to say, okay, I decided I was going to do it for this long. And now I need to be able to mother and mother the way that I want, to the fullest ability, and be fully present and whole. And this is where I'm going to make that shift. And so we talk about, okay, great. Like, what does that look like for you? And is that, is that going well? How does that go? Or do you feel better? Are we checking in? So all of those things, I work a lot in that regard with them.
So this is a big one. And I think it causes a lot of debate. And I know that my mom always said once teeth were involved, she cut us off.
But I know where you're going.
Yeah. You know what the question is. Is there a time that you quote unquote should stop breastfeeding and wean your baby?
No. Nope. So again, it's personal preference. So babies get teeth. And the worldwide weaning age is 4 years old, like the average.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends exclusively breastfeeding until 6 months and then weaning around 1 year. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization recommends breastfeeding until at least age 2. And like April said, the average weaning age around the world is 4 years old. I'm sure this won't be the last time we visit this topic.
So in America, we've decided that a year is like, we're like, oh, okay, a year is our goal. And some people go more, some people go less, but I really shy away from shoulds in general for so many reasons, but mostly because like you should do whatever works for you is my answer. So teeth are tricky. And you get bit and you go, ooh, okay. But they're not impossible. So when you're talking about nursing a toddler, they learn toddler manners. They learn nursing manners. They learn to ask. They learn that they get put down when they tug at your shirt, or it's not time right now. So no, I think it's a really personal thing. Personally, I nursed my fourth the longest by far. Because there wasn't another baby, and it ended up just being a comfort thing between the two of us, and he was happy and I was happy, and it worked well. There was weaning in my personal life when another baby was coming. That was like a natural weaning method. So they were different ages. And I think that's what it depends on. It depends on, is this your first baby? Are you intending to have another baby? Is it, is this an emotional connection for you guys? Working mothers that continue to pump and go back to work love that reconnection time. So to say, well, now they have teeth, so you should be done. Would be an emotional change for them when that's their reconnection time. So really it's about, is this still serving both of you? And it's okay if one of you says no, it needs to change then.
So it's a really personal decision.
Very. Like, and it can change, with each woman, with each pregnancy, with each child, it can be different.
So I know you have just this world of knowledge. So this is going to be a hard question for you. I think if you could give just one piece of advice to a new mom, breastfeeding or otherwise, what would it be?
Oh gosh, I want it to be so good.
You can have a couple if you want.
Okay, good. Because I do. I mean, I just watch them and they're just so awe-inspiring. I would say trust your instincts. There's nothing that you can't change later. So if what's working for you right now works, then do that. But really just trust your instincts. Look at your baby and trust your instincts. Because I think that when I say trust your instincts, it means like, don't Google all the things. I've been saying April it lately. I'm like, just April it. And I have a client who texts me and she's like, I'm Apriling it. And I'm like, okay. But because we can go down these rabbit holes that just lead us to lack of confidence. And really, if we just keep looking at our baby and say, this feels good to me, like this feels right. Then if it feels right, don't ask someone to tell you it's wrong, right? Just trust it. Like, because I think we go, oh, this feels right. And then we look around at the outside world, like, this is right, right? This is right, right? And then we hear a no and we go, crap, like, oh no. Yeah. And really, we need to stop asking. We need to stop asking for permission to mother the way that we need to mother. We don't need permission. They don't need permission. I'm not giving them permission. That's not my job. I don't do that. I don't tell them what to do and I don't give them permission. I say, what do you need? And then they say, this is what I need. And I go, okay, well, I'll help you do that. But we look too much for permission for all the things. So look at your baby, trust your instinct. And once you decide, just do it. Just like be in it and do the work and love your baby. And there's no one better than that than you.
So you service the Columbus area, right?
Yes.
So if you live in the Columbus area, where can our listeners contact you or get
I do
some of your
virtual. I did a virtual class, like we Zoomed and we talked, and I'm like getting so tech savvy, but my 10-year-old daughter also helps me. But I did a couple of virtual classes. So I do that as well. And I love it. So I love virtual things, which came from the pandemic. But in Columbus, if you want to see my face and you want me in your house, I am at inthistogetherdoula.com. And then on Instagram as well, on inthistogetherdoula.com, I do stories from my car where I sing a little, which is very embarrassing, but came about very organically. I stopped at a stoplight.
I recommend, though. They're fun to watch. I did a little stalking before we talked.
So good. I mean, I'm always in my car, like going to a client or taking kids places or whatever. So I love like being in my car, but I did it very organically. I just went stoplight stories one day and then it turned into in my car stories. And so it's kind of always how I'm like telling stories about client visits and like what's happening. So yes, in Columbus, if you want me in your home, that's where you find me. And then what's really exciting for Columbus people is that I teamed up with a pelvic floor specialist to cover all the things. So when you're in Columbus, you get visits with me, you get visits with Missy. It's called the Motherhood Project, which I think is just so important because my dream is just to have this kind of center where like a woman going through this transition is like, okay, what do I need and where do I find it? And I think that these are key things. It's her mental health in transition. With me. And then what's great about Missy is she does pelvic floor, but she's also in it all about like, but how are you feeling? So covering mothers in that way has been really exciting for me as far as being in Columbus. So yes, I will be all over Columbus for the people that need me and the families.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm so ready.
What word do you use most often for breast?
Boobs. With moms and babies, I use boobs a lot. I say they're boobs, or I say breast and I say breast tissue. But I would say if I'm just talking, like I send the melon emoji and I say boobs.
What is your least favorite word for breasts?
Jugs. It's just too much. It's just too much.
Funny because it's milk related too. So.
Yeah, I know, but it makes me think cow milk, and I'm like, no, it's so much greater than that.
Do you remember your first bra?
I actually don't. I mean, I'm sure it was my mom. I'm sure it was mortifying. Like, oh, look at these. Because I think I was so young. I think I was like 11. So I don't remember. I remember it being very closely tied to like not too much later getting my period. So I think it was very much like, okay, this is what we're doing now. These are all the things, but I don't remember like exactly what it was. I would have to ask my mom because I'm certain that she was right there.
What is your favorite thing or something interesting about your own breasts?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I thought about it after listening to previous episodes of yours because it didn't make the like arc to like, oh yeah, that's really important until I heard kind of people's breast stories. But I had cysts on my breasts or in my breasts. I had fibroadenomas that I found when I was 17 years old. I was at my job and I moved my arm and went, what's that? So I actually had 3 of them removed my senior year in high school. So when it came to breastfeeding my own kids, I remember kind of being like, well, I hope these things work. And I had an amazing surgeon who was actually the father of a girl that I went to high school with, who I still remember, Dr. Conyers. And he was so gracious and kind and wonderful. He put my IV in when a nurse couldn't get it. Like, that's literally something I still remember. This was a long time ago. But this idea that kind of what I said about this transition women go through, right? These were this and they were this before, and now I want them to do this. I think that probably stuck with me more than I considered before hearing you talk to other women about their breast experiences, because I know what it's like to have the doubt of, will this work? Is this, going to go well for me? And then also that change for me of, being a little scared in that moment when I was young, but I wasn't thinking about my future babies and if I'd be able to feed them really then. But years later it came back and I was so grateful that I had this bigger appreciation for what my body could do. So I think having that experience, is really tied to how I see women face breastfeeding challenges for me in a greater way. So thank you for that, because I hadn't thought about it. That was something that happened to me as a teenager. So I'd be like, yeah, I had this. And, I had fibro, like I had really bumpy breasts then. And I had to do like mammogram things sooner than other women because of it. And I'm really good at checks and all of those things because of it. But I didn't ever think of how it was tied to like how I watched women go through their breastfeeding, like self-doubt and confidence and all that stuff. So I actually was really appreciative of that. So thank you. But yeah, it's funny. That came up.
It's funny, actually. I had a similar experience I've talked to so many people like prepping for this podcast, and it just made me think about things with my breasts that I never even considered. That like, even before I started this podcast, I was like, there's a connection there.
Isn't that great though? It's so good when that happens, because you really get passionate about things. Yeah. You get passionate about things and then you're like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay, wait. And then it just kind of dawns on you. But like this idea that we get to know ourselves better by the way we connect with other people and hearing other people's stories.
100%.
So cool. And that's what's so great about talking and finding voices like you're doing, is that like, what else can we learn?
Yeah. I forgot to ask this one, actually. What type of bra, if any, do you prefer and why?
I am definitely a no wire girl from way back, probably started when I had babies. But I go through, it has to be comfortable. If it hurts, I'm out. But I would say I'm really a fan of the bralette lately, because I have breasts that are no longer working breasts as far as like feeding children. So they've gotten smaller, and that's kind of nice. So I would say I'm definitely a workout bra, like a sports bra in the morning, and then a bralette or something without wire for the rest of the day, depending on what I'm wearing. I am not a fan of the strapless. I'll do it and it's like cute, but I still always fuss with it. Cannot find there's no such thing as a perfect strapless for me.
The best one I've ever found, coming from a bra designer, the only one that I'll wear, is the Wacoal red carpet strapless bra.
Okay.
And I didn't design it. I don't know who designed it. It's just,
that's
just pure. Like I'm a triple D right now, and it's the only one I'll wear. It stays up. It doesn't move. Like,
okay. I'll have to look. I might need those in the show notes. Thank you.
I will. I'll send you the link.
Perfect. I love that. Yes, that's the only one. So if you can change my mind, I'm open. I'm for it.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I'd wear it for more than like a couple hours, but if I have to go to a wedding or something, like that's the one.
Okay. I'm in. I'll try it.
What do you think is the hardest part of having breasts?
Ooh. Them being something that draws attention to us, unwanted attention. I think that's really difficult. I think, I have a daughter. I was young and had breasts when I was close to her age. And I remember distinctly like doing the horn thing to truck drivers driving down the road. I remember my mom looking at me once and going, "You can't do that anymore." And that I had like reached an age where like it was not like a safe, the safest choice, because I was a young woman now. And I think that's the thing, is mentally we're not there, but physically we can be. And that's hard. It's a hard thing to navigate, and then it being the focal point of some sort of attention, but also being something that can serve us so well, like I see in my work, I think can be a tricky thing to navigate, like sort of being a sexual object or used for your sexual pleasure, whatever that looks like, and then changing it to this function with your baby in this role of motherhood can be a challenging shift. But it starts for us when we're girls, and like, what is this for? What is this? Is it for this attention? Is it for this? Is it? And I think we need to make that messaging clearer to our girls about what that looks like.
I agree 100%. And last but not least, what do you wish those without breasts knew about breasts?
I think that it's like they're a lot to carry around sometimes. like, I'm glad that these are enjoyable to look at and do whatever else with, but also like it's sweaty under here and like I'm tired, and bras are like, great, but also like just get it off. So I would say that, it's a body part that like isn't just for decoration. My profession says that they're functional and amazing. Because breast milk is. I could go on about that forever. So I would just say that, it's not like an arm or anything else. It changes so much, so when we talk about a lifetime of your body, breasts show so much change. So be kind to them if you're not a breast owner and you love someone that has them.
Yeah, definitely. Be kind to your
worth
breasts.
it. Yeah, be nice to them. Exactly.
All right, April, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a fantastic conversation, and we talked about a lot of fun stuff.
Thank you, Nadia. I appreciate it. And I enjoyed it so much. I love what y'all are doing. So thank you for including me.
We love what you're doing.
Thank you.
The Very Breast Podcast Ever was written, produced, and recorded by Nadia Figueroa and Alyssa McHugh. Cover art by Alyssa McHugh. Opening music by Margaret Tran. Check her out on Spotify. For episode transcripts and sources, please visit our website at theverybreastpodcastever.com. Do you have questions? Corrections? Do you want to tell us your breast story? Get in touch with us on Instagram at theverybreastpod or email us at theverybreastpodcastever@gmail.com. If you like our podcast, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, share with your breasties, and consider donating to our Patreon. Thanks for listening. Now go out and make today the best day ever. Hey, it's me again. Do you want to tell us your breast story? Do you know someone who works with breasts in their career or has a story to tell us? Do you just have a funny story about boobs? We want to hear from you. Please DM us on Instagram or email us at theverybreastpodcastever@gmail.com if you'd like to be on the show. See you next time, breasties.